I need to ask you something. If someone fainted on the phone with you slurring their words, giving you a partial address, going silent, what would you do? I called an ambulance. I called the gas emergency line. I spent 2 hours convinced I'd just listened to a man die. And then he called back and casually told me he'd been faking it because he thought it would get his boiler fixed faster.
I have been at this job for 1 month. Out-of-hours emergency repair call center councils, housing associations, the kind of job where the name implies urgency, and the reality is mostly people calling because their tap is dripping. I don't love it. Pause ones, but I take it seriously, because occasionally it isn't a dripping tap. Pause twos, the call came in mid-shift. A man, let's call him Julian, reported no heating, no hot water, and a gas smell. Pause one, standard procedure, call the National Gas Emergency Line first. Then call us back and we handle the boiler. I told him exactly that, and then something happened that I was not prepared for. Pause ones, his words started to slur. Not gradually, abruptly. Mid-sentence, the clarity just drained out of his voice and what came back was slow, thick, wrong. Pause one, I'm going. Dizzy, lightheaded. I stayed calm. Training says stay calm. I asked for his address. He started to give it to me, building number, street name, and then the words just stopped. Not a pause, a stop. Pause two, there are moments in this job where the floor drops out from under you. That was one of them. I called an ambulance with the partial address I had. I called the gas emergency line and reported a possible leak with a collapsed tenant. And then I sat there. Pause ones for 2 hours. 2 hours of not knowing. 2 hours of my brain cycling through the worst version of events on a loop. Did he make it to the floor or did he fall? Is the address I gave them right? Did I mishear the street name? Pause ones, was there a man dying somewhere right now? Because I got 1 digit wrong. Pause twos, the gas engineer called back first. Been to the address. No gas leak. Ambulance are on site. They've checked him over. He's fine. Fine. I let out a breath I had been holding for 2 hours. Fine. No leak, no emergency. No one collapsed on a floor somewhere. Fine. Pause ones, and then Julian called back. Pause twos, his voice was completely different. No slurring. No distress. Normal, slightly sheepish. The tone of someone about to explain a minor misunderstanding. Pause one. Yeah, so I was just bullshitting. I thought if I said I was going dizzy from gas, it would get my boiler pressure topped up quicker. I didn't respond immediately. I was doing a quiet inventory of what had just happened. Pause ones, an ambulance had gone to his address. An ambulance that was not at someone else's address, because it was at his. A gas engineer had driven to his property and checked a building for a leak that did not exist. I had spent 2 hours in what I can only describe as low-grade terror, genuinely convinced I had just heard a man die. Pause ones, because he didn't want to wait for a boiler pressure top-up. The patience required to sit with that information and respond professionally is something I did not know I possessed. Pause twos, I've been in this job for 1 month. I've had callers who were scared. I've had callers who were angry. I've had callers who were confused or elderly or both at once. Pause ones, I have not, until now, had a caller who performed a medical emergency as a queue-skipping strategy. Memory echo the moment his voice went silent, the half address on my screen, the 2 hours of not knowing. Pause ones, all of that, for a boiler. Hello, I'm Dr. Julian Reed. This story is, on the surface, about one man's extraordinary decision to fake a medical emergency. But I want to look at what it reveals beneath that. What Julian engaged in is a behavior I call system gaming through manufactured crisis, the use of a false emergency to override a process that feels too slow or too indifferent to his individual needs. This is not calculated cruelty. Julian was not thinking about the ambulance being diverted. He was not thinking about the gas engineer or the person at the call center. He was thinking about his boiler, his timeline, his comfort, and he constructed a shortcut. This is what makes the behavior particularly interesting from a psychological perspective. It is not malice. It is the complete absence of the cognitive step that asks, what does this cost someone else? We have a name for this in behavioral psychology: tunnel vision entitlement. The person is not evil. They simply do not perform the calculation that includes other people. Their need fills the entire frame. Everything outside at the ambulance, the engineer, the 2 hours of someone else's genuine distress simply does not exist as a real consideration. Ryan's anger is completely valid, but I would invite him to notice something. Julian called back and admitted it. He was sheepish. He wasn't proud of it. He had reached the end of the logic and found, probably for the first time, someone who made the cost of it visible. That doesn't excuse it, but it does locate it. This was not a predator. This was someone whose sense of proportion is catastrophically miscalibrated, and who had never before been held at the end of that miscalibration. Ryan, your 2 hours of distress were real. Your anger is legitimate. The resources that were wasted had real consequences for real people. If you have ever been in a system that failed you, or been the person holding the line while someone on the other end made your problem invisible, you already understand what this costs. Subscribe to Soul Stories and tell me, was Julian just desperate? Or is there a point at which desperation stops being an excuse? Leave your answer below.